Well, it's an honor and a blessing being here in Israel. My name is Chief Joseph Riverwind. My full name is Joseph Rivera Israel Riverwind. My family, my tribe, are the Arawak Taino people. Our original homeland was from the island of Puerto Rico. Boriken is what we called it, which means House of the Great and Valiant Chief, all the way up through middle Georgia. And we were the ones who discovered Columbus, lost in the ocean. But interestingly enough, in 1492, Isabella kicked the Jews out of Spain. So many of the very first settlers and many of the colonists who came to my people's land were Sephardim. They were all Sephardic Jews fleeing the Inquisition. So among my tribe, there are many of our people who were not only Native American, Taino and Arawak Indians, but were also Sephardic Jews, also known as B'nai Anusim. Many who were force converted to Christianity. So I have both the bloodlines of the Sepharad as well as the indigenous bloodlines.
And I'm Dr. Larlyn Riverwind, and my heritage is I'm a descendant of the Cherokee and the Muskogee Creek, and also Irish and Scottish. And there were rumors in my family that there was Jewish heritage also, and the DNA says yes. So that was a surprise to us because I didn't ever hear about that until I started asking questions when I was older.
And there's been a very, very interesting just movement among the Native people in reconnecting with Israel. Because there are some people who think, well, some of the tribes may be lost tribes. And I'm not talking about Mormon doctrine. I'm talking about when you take the traditional stories, the oral tradition, our language, our customs, there's some tribes, a very small percentage, that have an obvious connection. And is it because of settlements in the ancient times? Is it because of the dispersion of the 10 tribes? Is it because of our genetics, from the Sephardim who came to be among us? Or is it all of those things put together? With me, I was raised by my grandparents. And my grandmother would sing Hebrew Ladino songs, Sephardic songs in the kitchen. I didn't know that's what it was, when I was growing up. My grandfather would take me outside and teach me how to hunt, how to fish, and all the native traditions of the land. And it wasn't when I was 17, I joined the military, I joined the army, and I wanted nothing to do with Christianity. Because the Native American Holocaust began with my tribe. We were the first tribe to be enslaved. If we didn't gather enough gold, our hands were cut off. Just horrible, horrendous things that they did to our people under the auspice of the Catholic Church and the doctrine of discovery, which was a Catholic doctrine. And so I had a lot of hatred for Spain and the Spanish. And so I joined the military, and I thought to myself, I'm going to go back to the traditions
and
of my tribe.
Christianity. You had hatred for
Christianity. Christianity and Catholicism. So the Spanish hate, just pure hate in my heart. I couldn't forgive the things that they did to my ancestors. And so I decided, in my own wisdom, I'm going to go back to the traditions of my tribe. I'm going to learn the traditional Native American ways of different tribes. And so my journey began at 17. I joined the army, and as I'm being stationed and going to different places, I meet holy men and holy women, the medicine people, spiritual leaders of different tribes. And I'm going to ceremony, and I'm hearing the retelling of stories from their tribes. And the stories are the way that they're told, they don't change. So as a child, the elders see a child who's very good at memorizing, and they take that child and they teach them the stories, word for word. And the child cannot add one word, and they can't take away a word. So when we listen to a story, it's no different than it was 100 years ago, 500 years ago, or 1,500 years ago. The story remains pure. And so I'm listening to these stories, And I'm hearing stories about Turtle Island, when the land used to look like the back of a turtle coming out of the water. And we were one tribe of people, and our ancestors tried to build a sky tower to reach the Creator. And the Creator became angry with the people, and he separated the land, separated the people. And I said, wow, I've heard this story before. And then I hear a story from the Choctaw tribes of Creator, who they call Abba, who came to a man named Nuah and told him to build a large canoe because the earth would be covered with water and it would destroy the giants that our people were having to fight with. And I thought again, wow, I've heard this story before. And so many stories passed down in our native tribes. And this is before missionaries, before any Christian contact with our tribes. And I realized these are the same stories that we find in the Tanakh. These are the same stories that are in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And it created a struggle within me because I thought I was going back to the traditions of my ancestors, but here the traditions of my ancestors were pointing right back to the Bible. And I was like, what is happening here? What is going on? And then later in life, I came to find out about my Sephardic Jewish heritage. After my father passed away, one of the last living relatives, my grandmother's youngest sister, I spoke with her on the phone, and she said, "Did you receive the package I sent you?" And she thought that I was my father, and she didn't realize that my father was passed away. I tried to tell her that, but she didn't comprehend, and she's older, very elderly. And so I just kept speaking with her. And when I got off the phone, I went, because I took all my father's things when he passed away and just put them in the storage shed. And so I go looking, I'm looking, what is this box? What is this? And I find the package, and I open the package, and inside are 3 sephers, all in Hebrew, published in the 1800s, that my grandfather, or my grandmother's father, my great-grandfather, that he would read on Shabbat with the girls. And then I started realizing, all the names of my family, Israel, Eulalia, Gadiel, they're all Hebrew names, all of them. And I said, okay, what's going on? And then pictures of bar mitzvahs, pictures of my uncle Israel marrying a Jewish woman, the picture of the rabbi, and then they're in Israel. I should have brought some of those pictures because there's street names and things too. So who knows? I may have some family still here descended from that. So that was how many years ago?
Pictures of them celebrating Purim.
Celebrating Purim, yes. So that was not long ago, maybe 5 years? 5 years ago.
Well, what made him start asking the questions was we went to a synagogue once, and it was a new thing for us to go to a synagogue, and I heard they were starting to sing a song, and Joseph started singing the words. The song was in Hebrew, and I looked at him and I said, "How do you know this song?" And he said, "My grandmother and I used to sing it in the kitchen when she was making meals." And I said, "How does your grandmother know a Hebrew song?" And he said, "I don't know. I didn't know it was Hebrew. I just thought it was some language." And so, he didn't realize, he didn't know what Hebrew language sounded like. He just knew all the words to the song. And so I said, "You should ask your family."
Ask, yeah. And so I started asking, and then my family started sharing with me, and that's really what started this journey for me. And for even growing up and when I was in the military and still searching, people would like proselytize to me. Oh, you need to come to the faith. You need to become a Christian. You're a pagan. You're a heathen. And I would sit back and I'd say, "You're calling me pagan, but you're celebrating pagan holidays, Christmas, Easter." I said, "How can that's hypocrisy?" And so I wanted nothing to do with the church or Christianity. But then when I started learning about my Sephardic heritage, and I started studying, there was one day that I read a book, and it was by a Native American man called One Church, Many Tribes. And he was talking about how you can be a believer and still retain who you are culturally as a Native American, and that was eye-opening for me. And I read the New Testament again, and I realized, I read the whole Bible again, but especially the New Testament, and I realized, this Jesus, this Yeshua, that all I've heard all my life in churches or different denominations, this is different than what is being presented. He kept Torah. He taught others to keep Torah, and there was a difference between Jesus. To me, there's a difference between Jesus, the Catholic Constantinian Jesus, and there's a difference between Yeshua, who was a rabbi, and he had Talmudim, and so I started learning about Constantine, the creation of Catholicism, and how paganism and idolatry came into the church, and everything just started to make sense. And I thought to myself, okay, I can reconcile this. I can reconcile my Native American culture with our dances, the drums, because the missionaries, when they came to our people, they made us stop doing all these ceremonies. They made us stop assembling on the new moon. They made us stop celebrating the 7 festivals. Many of the same biblical traditions that our tribes had, the missionaries made us stop doing. And that's why so many Native Americans rejected Christianity. But the truth being that a lot of these ancient traditions that our people have are rooted in the Bible.
The reason why so many Native Americans rejected Christianity is because the Christians were killing the native people and stealing the land, and
a Bible in one hand and a sword in the other.
So one of the things that I realized about that was they were doing this during a time when most of them were still illiterate. The literacy rate in the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, even back to the 1500s, was so bad. Most people were illiterate. They couldn't read what was in Scripture, so they just had to trust what the preacher said. And the preacher was teaching what the Catholic churches had taught them, the doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny. And so they were saying, these are savages, you can take their land, and you're above them. And so that's not what the book says. Mm-hmm. It says don't move the boundary stone of your neighbor, and there's punishment for that when you do. And that Elohim set the borders of the nations, and that we're not supposed to move those boundaries. So this is what happens when people can't read.
There was an explorer named De Soto, and De Soto, when he came and he was exploring through especially through the Cherokee lands, I was reading one of his accounts, and he sent some conquistadors and a priest to a Cherokee village where he saw the smoke, so he sent them there, and they stayed there for about a week, and they came back to report to De Soto, and the report from the priest was, we need to leave these people alone. They live a more godly life and biblical life than we do. And that was the truth for so many of us. My tribe had prophecies that pale-faced bearded men would come to our shores in 3 strange war canoes, and they would bring with them talking leaves. And these talking leaves would be a complete knowledge of who we knew the Creator to be. So in my tribe, our name for the Creator is Yahya. And so when 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, showed up on our shore, we said, oh, this is prophecy. Pale-faced, bearded men, conquistadors, covered like turtles, was part of the prophecy, Guamiquenas. And on that ship was a priest named Bartolomé de las Casas. And he ended up becoming known as the champion of the Indians because he saw what was being done to our tribes, and he would write back to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and tell them the horrendous things that were happening. And so when these people came, we thought this is prophecy. So we were ready to receive this knowledge. And the Bible was the talking leaves. The paper was like leaves, and it was the word of the Creator. But, as I said, it was a sword in one hand and a Bible in the other. and all the horrendous things that they started doing to our people made the native people step back. And we said, wait a minute. One, this is not the God that we've known. This is not the creator that we know. And now if I become saved, am I going to become like you? Stealing, killing, murdering. And so that's why many native people did not receive the message of the Bible. But as I started studying more, and
many still don't.
And many still don't, because there's still the association in many tribes. They say, well, that's the white man's God. But truly, he's the God of all nations, but specifically he gave the oracles in the Torah to 12 tribes. And the 12 tribes weren't white people. They weren't. They were Jewish people. So there's still much education to be had. But there's an offense, and it says in one of the Mishlei, one of the Proverbs, that a brother offended is twice harder to reach than a fortified tower. And that's what's happened with the Native Americans. But there's a shift taking place. And when Native people come here to Israel, it's just something powerful happens. Not just inside of us, but there is a feeling of being home. And we're very well received by Orthodox rabbis, by the secular Israelis. We're just very received well. And the last time we were here, we were praying at the Kotel, and there was a rabbi who told us, he said that there's a prophecy. And I don't know if he was a Chabadnik or Kabbalist. I don't know what type of Judaism he was, but he said to us, he said, we have a prophecy that when the Indianim, when the Native Americans come to Jerusalem and they're praying to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we know Mashiach is coming soon. And we found that prophecies in Isaiah 18:7, I believe it is, where it says that a mighty nation, a bronze-skinned or smooth-skinned people from a land that is divided by many rivers will come to bring tribute to Adonai Sevaot. And they said, this rabbi said, there was 3 rabbis that were there, he said, this is speaking of you. This is speaking of the Native Americans. And we're seeing more and more Native Americans, we're seeing chiefs coming to the wall and praying. And so that to these men was, they were full of joy. They said, Mashiach is coming, Mashiach is coming. The Indians are coming to Jerusalem. They're praying, to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, and very excited.
Our elders came in 1999, and I don't know, maybe it was some of the first Native Americans to ever come. And there have been some who've come back since then. And we're trying to bring more because the Palestinians are trying to court Native American people. They're trying to marry Native people. They're trying to talk to them and say, oh, the Jews have stolen our land. And we're trying to educate them to say, no, the picture of the Jewish people having Israel restored to them is a beautiful picture of hope for Native people, because one day we hope that the native lands are restored to the tribes. It might not be in this world, but maybe one day. And so when we're trying to educate them, so we like to bring them to Israel and to connect them with the Jewish people so they can see that the Jewish people, that the Bible is tribal, that this is the people connected to their land. It's difficult because our people are still in poverty and very, it's hard, but Hashem is doing it, and even overcoming the obstacles to bring them here.
And so we see the Jewish people as the indigenous people. There's over 3,000 years of history, not just written in the Bible, but it seems that almost every month something else comes out of the earth that proves the Jewish people are the original people of this land. So, saying all of that, what do you think?
Well, I like very much the story. You know, you are searching for your root as Indian and not Christian, and you find in the Bible your root as Indian and Jewish and Christian as well. You find that it's all one really. Okay, so God have His way to bring back everyone to his place.